Okay, hello everybody. This is Surayya from the Purposeful Professional Podcast. We are the podcast for the people, your career, and the culture. And today I have a very, very special guest with me. This young woman is an advocate. She is a leader. She is an entrepreneur. She's an innovator and a visionary for women who need a sense of body empowerment, specifically for those who are suffering from eating disorders. So today she is here to tell her story. I'm very, very excited to welcome Alekia to the podcast. Alekia, introduce yourself to the podcast.
Hi! First of all, thank you so much for that introduction. You really gassed me up. But hello, everyone. My name is Alekia, and I am so excited to be here. I recently graduated from Wellesley College, and ever since, I've been working on my company and in general, working on a lot of advocacy, etc., for both the body image, body dysmorphia, destigmatization, and eating disorder space. So really excited to share some more about that and talk about things.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to have you here on the podcast. Okay, so we have a couple sections, and for those who know us know, we do a little pop culture section relevant to every guest's work. So I figured, okay, eating disorders, body positivity, the areas that you're in, there's a lot of chatter around that. Maybe because of social media and I would say our body obsessed society, there is so much chatter around the body, specifically the bodies of women. So I wanted to have a conversation, and we actually do have our first ever two-part pop culture conversation because Alekia is very great at breaking down culture like I am. So I'm really excited to get into this. For our first part, we'll be talking about the actress Barbie Ferreira from Euphoria and her Ozempic speculations and accusations. And then we're also going to be talking about Love is Blind's AD's sexualization. So we're going to get into it, y'all. We're going to get into the sexualization of women's bodies, and we're also going to get into the policing of women's bodies, whether we're using Ozempic or not, whether we're heavier or slim. Why is there so much political, social interest in our bodies as women? So let me know if you're ready. Let me know if you're ready.
I'm so ready.
Okay, so for part one, we're going to discuss Barbie Ferreira and Ozempic. And for those who do not know, Barbie Ferreira is an actress that is on Euphoria. She plays Kat Hernandez on Euphoria. And she recently has been accused of using Ozempic since she has lost a significant amount of weight. So my first question for you is, what do you think about the overall trend of Ozempic and similar medications like glamorizing weight loss?
Well, I actually just think it's so unfortunate right off the bat because I know that Ozempic was used to treat legitimate medical conditions, and the fact that that has been rendered inaccessible to people who need it, especially people that are maybe lower income, that now can't access it because these celebrities are monopolizing that medical space, makes me really angry because a lot of these people, they oscillate, especially when it comes to female celebrities, they oscillate between I don't know whether next week it's gonna be boob jobs and BBLs, and then the week after they're gonna get those things dissolved or removed and then get Ozempic again. And I think especially with the Kardashians, for instance, I know that there's been so many before and after pictures, except the before and afters are within the same month, and it's pre-Ozempic and post-Ozempic. And when these people are placed in positions where there are so many eyes on them and they deny the use of Ozempic or liposuctions or whatever else and make it seem like they're changing their lifestyle habits to suddenly lose a dramatic amount of weight, it not only sets off an extremely unrealistic standard, sets off a precedent for lying to your audience. It also just is unfair to the people that actually need it and are now seeing what they would need as a legitimate struggle just romanticized and turned into another medium for weight loss. So
yeah, crazy. I feel like, oh my God, I understand what you're saying, because as far as I'm concerned, Ozempic was created to treat type 2 diabetes. So it was created to help people who deal with something called insulin resistance, which essentially, your body creates a lot of insulin, and you hold on to weight as a result of that to lose weight. So to see all these celebrities just kind of like taking this drug that, number one, wasn't created for them, and then number two, isn't supposed to be used commercially, being used so openly, and even it being glorified and glamorized, I'm like, okay, I don't think that this is okay. So I agree with you. I think it's super unfortunate. I think it's an unfortunate event. I think it just also shows, like what you said, how body obsessed we are, because if it's not like, oh, you've lost so much weight, it's like, oh, your boobs have gotten bigger, your butt has gotten bigger, or now your butt is small. Like, we are obsessed with observing and monitoring women's bodies. And I think that has created this whole Ozempic craze, because people would rather be slim than be big. So if they're going to monitor my body, let me just be slim,
Yeah, no, and it's like I'm thinking about what you said about like body obsession specifically, and it's because we've turned our bodies into trends, and because we're trends, we're commodities that need to change ourselves in order to best appeal to the audience. So it turns women's bodies into products to be marketed so that other people can then strive to look like that. And it's just like, you're not a body anymore. You're just a part of a larger, really convoluted system. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oop. I love that. I love that. Turns women's bodies into like, I love, because that's exactly what's happening, right? That's exactly what's happening. And we're beholden to these obsessive and nasty like beauty standards and body standards. So thank you for verbalizing that. My next question for you is like, do you find the concerns about her weight problematic or normal? Do you think it's right for us as fans, as consumers, etc., followers, to speculate about someone's weight loss or gain so much?
I don't think it's normal at all. And I think what's worth mentioning or even questioning as audience members is why a lot of these public figures, especially women, feel the need to modify their bodies so much in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes down to the amount of scrutiny that they're under, no matter what they look like. Barbie Ferreira, for instance, she's been like, I remember back in like 2016 or 2015, she was all over my Pinterest because she was like the Tumblr icon at the time for like fashion. And she really was groundbreaking as a plus size model. And then when she got onto Euphoria, I know that there was this dichotomy in terms of the way she was received. On one hand, people were clapping in terms of representation. And on the other, people were comparing her to her other skinnier castmates. And that probably put a lot of weight, stress, and like it probably made it really mentally draining for her to interact positively with her own body. So when we sit and speculate these public figures' bodies so much, I think on one hand it's upsetting because a lot of them pretend that these procedures are natural, and to the people that are looking up to them and seeing them as quote unquote influencers, that is very upsetting for impressionable young audiences that now feel like they need to live up to that standard or obsessively work out in order to attain that body type. But on the other hand, these people are human beings as well, and they don't owe us any long drawn out conversation about why they are or are not losing weight. And it is because of their audiences that they are forced into these positions in the first place. So it's really a double-edged sword, and it makes me very sad. And I do think it's abnormal.
Crazy. I mean, the way that you're breaking this down, that's a Wellesley education. because you're really breaking it down and you're bringing us there. Like, we're going there.
I have thoughts.
But it's you're absolutely right. Like, number one, it's not normal. It's not normal that her body's being monitored. But like you said, tap into the deeper reason. Why are they even doing these modifications in the first place? And you brought up something that I didn't even think about, like how she probably saw her body pre-Euphoria and then post-Euphoria, right? I think that when she was that Tumblr icon and people were like, hey, there's a plus size girl that dresses well, she's beautiful, I feel like I can see myself in her. She was in a space of, I feel like we go from this space of like self-love and being very contained within ourselves to then being on the set of Euphoria and comparing herself to Zendaya or Sydney Sweeney, and not only comparing, but she probably saw the fact that we we can say Euphoria has lifted Zendaya's profile significantly to the point where she's gotten major brand deals with Dior and like all different types of, we could say, luxury fashion houses. Sydney Sweeney as well has experienced more success in acting. And I guess she feels like, is it because of my weight as to why I didn't get these luxury fashion houses knocking on my door, or why I didn't get Sydney Sweeney's success with more movies, etc.? So you begin comparing yourself to the other women, and then the industry on a whole, that pressure, like we said, that objectification, that like microscopic glass that you're under, I think she caved to that. So I understand exactly what you're saying. Like, it's not normal. And when we obsess over it, we contribute to maybe her own feelings of insecurity, and then the feelings of insecurity of other women who see themselves in her. So it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack.
And I think it's especially with women that we scrutinize this much. Like, you never see a man's sections look the same as a women's comment sections, right? And so when we speculate this much and we ask this many questions and we feel like we deserve answers for the way that women look in a way that we do not treat anybody else. And so, like you said, we're feeding into such a broad problem, and we are just contributing to not just her mental state, but also just this systemic way that we interact with women's bodies online.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of mental state, right? My next question says that she's previously opened up about her struggles with weight, anxiety, and depression issues. Do you think those mental effects, so by that I mean the anxiety and depression, go away when you lose weight? Why or why not?
I don't think they go away at all. I think that what I've seen also, like, I've seen a lot of Instagram reels about this, and I know that's not necessarily the most credible source for information, but I've seen a lot of people who have talked about having experienced a lot of weight loss and the sadness it brings them to think about the way that they were treated when they looked heavier compared to who they are now.
Yeah.
And I think that that sense of recognizing that you cannot escape your identity of being in a body, and that people are perceiving you, interacting with you, respecting you based on how you look, if anything, adds extra anxiety, because what you were afraid of is coming true. People are treating you, and then you become obsessed with the idea of keeping the way you look, keeping that image, right? Like staying slim, staying fit, because God forbid you lose that. And then now you're not just gaining weight, you're losing this newfound sense of respect, this newfound sense of adoration, or like kindness even, that you're being. So that never goes away. And I don't think that you can lose weight, but you can't lose that part of your identity. And that stays with you, like, and it's scary. So I really, unfortunately, unfortunately or not, don't think that these mental effects go away by just losing weight.
No, they don't. Honestly, like, honest to God, they really don't. Like, the truth is, these mental effects do not go away by losing weight. And I think that I really love the way that you articulated it, because it's almost like you go through this phase where you're insecure because you're heavy, and then you lose the weight, and then people begin to treat you differently, but you still hold on to those insecurities because deep down inside, there's this, do people like me for me, or do they like me because now my look is more palatable to them? My look is something that fits their friendship aesthetic. Oh yeah, your friendship aesthetics, right?
And then if you lose that, are you going to get dropped by these friends? Are you not going to be deemed cool anymore? Are you not going to get invited to parties?
It's just a function of our
value. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, it's just a function of our social media society and how, I guess we could say shallow we are. But continue with your point. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, it's like appearance has become, and I don't even know if this is necessarily just social media. I think this existed even back with the like heroin chic aesthetic and all these other things that dated all the way back to the 90s, in terms of like, I think it's existed ever since there has been a culture of having influencers. And this doesn't exist solely in social media. It could be models, it could be actresses, right? And so I think that the way that you look, people are worried about losing a certain aesthetic, because that aesthetic holds social capital. And when you lose weight or whatever, and suddenly become a marketable product in terms of the way you look, where you can now attend these social functions and be friends with these different people that you thought were cool, you're so stressed that you will lose that because you will lose your social capital. And I think that's a really, really messed up way of perceiving human beings. It's like antithetical to real relationships.
It's antithetical. Yeah, it absolutely is antithetical to real relationships. And I think that when Barbie Ferreira opened up about the weight anxiety and depression, I just kept on thinking, like, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away when you lose weight. And if anything, it takes on a new form because now you know people are fake. Now you know that people are shallow. And it gives you like, you become almost like a mini misanthrope. Like you just begin hating like humans in general because of the stark difference of how you were treated when you were bigger that to how you're treated now as a smaller person or someone who has a more appropriate, we can say, quote unquote, appropriate weight. So all of these things are things that I think about, and I'm really grateful that we can have this conversation and talk about it. So, you know, she's opened up about issues with binge eating as well, caused by the pressures generated by her fame in the era of social media. Does fame and social media exacerbate existing weight or body image issues? If so, how?
I'm so sure it does, because a huge part of, how I guess I internalized my relationship with body, especially when I did have an eating disorder when I was younger, is that I was really hyper fixated on the way that I was being perceived, right? Like it was the kinds of clothes I wore, the way I carried myself. I would be really nervous in a picture if I lifted my arms and a strip of my belly was visible. I was like, did somebody see this and think of me as fat? Did somebody see my thighs? Like this constant fixation for me with the way that I was perceived almost controlled every aspect of how I presented myself. And I wasn't on TV. I was in high school, right? People probably weren't really paying attention to me. But when you are on TV, when you are legitimately famous and have a huge social media presence, you are being perceived. All those fears that you have, that people are noticing a crinkle by your eye, a lump of fat on between your arm and your like bra strap, people will point that out in your comment sections. So I think that quite literally articulates every anxious thought that wires your brain. It gives it fodder. It allows you to read it under some anonymous username with a blank profile picture.
Yeah.
And then it has like 3,000 likes. And then you lose weight via Ozempic and people are like, why did she lose weight? Still doesn't look good though. Mid. Whatever it is, right?
And stupid crap.
Like, I can never win. You can never win. And you're being perceived 24/7. So yeah, I think it would make anybody's body image issues go crazy. It would probably introduce body image issues to someone that has none. You could be the most beautiful in the world and somebody would go mid in your comment sections. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy the audacity that user 18384 has in your comment sections, but they do, right? And so I really can't even imagine what Barbie Ferreira experienced being next to Zendaya, Alexa Demi, and Sydney Sweeney, all of whom are hailed as like beauty or sex icons. And Barbie Ferreira, who is gorgeous, by the way, was probably placed under scrutiny by all these people that have so much anti-fat bias, and they use her platform as the source of channeling all this hatred. And that makes me really sad.
I was going to say that. I was going to say that it stems from people who have their own insecurities, projecting their insecurities on other people. 100%. And that's what we do when we're on social media. We project our own insecurities onto people. And one of the things that I really do think about a lot is that the fact that those insecurities are, I could say, magnified because of the fact that we are online and because of the fact that people can see us. And if we have those insecurities with 1,000 followers or less, imagine how she feels, like you said, where your life is magnified. It's a magnifying glass and people come to your comments to hate. Like, one thing I know about these algorithms, these social media algorithms thrive on negativity. That's why people are allowed to talk crap about people with the blank profile pic. That's exactly why the comments that are hating get the most likes. The algorithms are not slick. They run experiments and they realize the more negative commentary, the more negative photos, pictures, whatever that I show people, the more time they spend on the platform. The more time they spend on the platform, the more money we can make through ads, whatever revenue model they have. So this is all about money, and it all points towards money. And for that reason, fame and social media will always exacerbate these issues.
100%.
Yeah, will always exacerbate these issues. And I want to say that fame isn't for everyone. And if it's not healthy for you, then maybe you should step back. Honestly, we're starting to realize fame is really for no one, because all these celebrities have a lot of issues. But fame definitely affects people in different ways. And what I would say to Barbie Ferrer is, like, if you are having binge eating issues, I need you to step back from this whole career, because it's not worth your health. Go back to, obscurity, become a vlogger, go to school, get a master's degree, do something different. Don't put yourself through this, because you don't have to.
Yeah, it makes me so sad though, because like I'm sure that like so many people, like Barbie Ferreira is such a talented actress, and the fact that she has to give up something that she is so naturally brilliant at because of hate and bias, and because I mean she is human, it does impact her. It's like your strategy is then two-tiered, right? On one hand, you're right, you take the decision to prioritize your mental and physical well-being, and you say, I'm going to step back from this, I'm going to choose an alternative career path, and I'm going to protect my peace. And then on the other hand, it's like the follow your dreams mindset, right? Like, what if she really breaks it? What if she continues? Then you've got to really put on like tinted glasses, cover your ears, and steamroll through and really like use the hate to your advantage, craft a new brand identity, and somehow be resilient. And neither option seems entirely fair, because it's like on one hand you're giving up your dreams, and on the other you have to deal with like a billion stones being thrown at you just to get to a finish line that you were told you could cross. And that just makes me sad.
Yikes, 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 yikes. But that goes into one other effect, or potential side effect of, I guess we could say these body modifications, or even this hyper body awareness that we have. So in Euphoria, her character, Kat Hernandez, struggles with her body image and then somehow ends up becoming a dominatrix. Euphoria talks about a lot of like sexual identity themes within the show. Do you think that body image struggles can lead to overt sexualization?
100%. Because, like we talked about earlier, women's bodies are often products. And in order to best fit the consumer, you have to pick an archetype in which you will be desirable. And you could either be the classy girl with the clean pretty or whatever else. You could be the Kardashian-esque like BBL. You could, there's these buckets that consumers will place you in order for you to be a good product for any company or TV show or anything else to market. And I think just like how Sydney Sweeney has now become this global sex icon, where her comment sections honestly make me feel so sick. Like sometimes I follow her and I'll like her photo, because I'm like, wow, this girl is so pretty, and like I like her like the work she's been in, and when she presents herself well. And then her comment sections are these like disgusting men that are detailing these really elaborate sexual fantasies, and it's got like 2,000 to 3,000 likes per comment, and I feel so ill. And I think, I can't imagine like the whole blurring between the act and the person, where if you're forced to play this character so much, how much of that did it embody for herself in terms of crafting kind of identity? How much power did that reclaim? Like, I don't know any of these questions because that taps into her psychology. But I think it's like two-pronged. One, it's how, body image leads to your perception of yourself in order to market yourself as more desirable, either for men, which is often the predominant consumer of female media and, the dictator of what women's bodies should look like. And two, it's the way that other people are perceiving you, and they can't separate the actors from the act, and identify you as an individual character, so they're looking at her now as a dominatrix. So I really can't answer whether her being a dominatrix gave her these body image struggles, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I definitely think that body image struggles can lead to overt sexualization. Absolutely, because like you said, it gives you this hyper awareness. So anybody who grew up, I see this trope that I don't like, but I see it a lot. Anybody who grew up feeling overlooked, or, you know, they were fat growing up. I'm not saying the word fat, but they were heavier, or they might have had glasses, or anything that people, you know, immature boys, not men, right, will look at a girl and say, oh, I don't want her because you see how round she is, or she wears glasses, whatever. And because we're taught to modify ourselves for the male gaze, which I know you know that, right? We're taught to literally appeal to that, right? And in our psyche and how we show up, what do men want? What do they find attractive? I often see those women when they become older, I don't want to say try hard, but yeah, sometimes try really hard. And if we look into their past, it was that they felt overlooked, or they felt like people didn't find them desirable. Either females didn't find them desirable as friends, or the men that they liked, if they liked men, didn't find them desirable, whatever. And they grow up and they internalize that. So now that they become older, it's like, oh, I want to be the baddest chick in the room. Or like you said, I want to have a clean girl aesthetic. I feel like I need to become some sort of archetype, soft girl aesthetic, some sort of archetype or aesthetic. I hate how Gen Z has aesthetics. But yeah, it's like we need to have some sort of aesthetic because, oh, I need to become this type of woman and market myself as this type of woman and have people see me as this type of woman, because then I'll get what these type of women get. And it's like, it's this transactional way of seeing yourself that oftentimes is rooted in this is insecurity from childhood. And I realize that and recognize that. So I agree. Yes, body image struggles can lead to overt sexualization. Absolutely. And like you said, like the men feed into it, because then all of a sudden when you start showing your breasts, your butt, it's like the comments change. The comments change.
So
you get more attention on you. You get more attention. And for a woman that's attention starved or felt like she grew up and was overlooked, that attention can be addictive and it can create a cycle.
And for a lot of people, it's just a career move, right? Like, I'm sure for Sydney Sweeney, appealing to the male gaze quite literally profited her career. It's what's driving sales in terms of like from her Instagram to ad campaigns to even movies that she stars in. The fact that she is so appealing to the male gaze is quite literally a business move for her, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the kind of thing where you realize that the patriarchy really permeates everything, and it is so difficult to separate the way a woman is perceived, marketed, and the way that our bodies are commodified from the male gaze and from therefore male validation. So it's this really convoluted cocktail that's so difficult to escape and so unfortunate to just be shown to us like on broad display via these like influencers and social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of sexualization, for part 2 of our pop culture conversation, we're going to talk about Love is Blind's Amber Desiree, aka AD sexualization. So Love is Blind, I don't know if it was earlier this year, I think it was, or late last year, there was this Love is Blind season that went nuts. Like people, I could see it all the time on social media. I mean, I actually started watching and I never watched Love is Blind, but I watched that season because of all of the just hysteria around Clay and AD, which is one of the couples on the show. And then I also believe the woman who said she looked like Megan Fox, and she did it. So there were a lot of like social media moments. AD was also left at the altar by the man who claimed he was going to marry her. There were a lot of things that happened, but one major theme on the show was that she was frequently sexualized throughout the show. And she also was the darkest skinned woman on the show. But because of her body, which, you know, she has a great figure, curvaceous, you know, lumps in the right places, we could say, quote unquote, she was sexualized. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So my first question for you is, and this is literally just an add-on to the last question, how do you think like the sexualization and objectification of our bodies impacts our body image? And how do you think it might have impacted AD?
I think it's quite literally that like thing we were talking about in terms of like placing women into buckets and kind of like figuring out which aesthetic we fit into. And again, sexualization and objectification is what people perceive to be as like higher levels of desirability, because when the male gaze approves of you, you fit those friendship aesthetics, you fit, you know, the social capitalist, you fit everything, right? So it seemed like if you manage to capture the attention of a male audience, it's this delusion that we're fed that all other life problems will go away. It's like the same delusion you're fed that your problems will go away when you lose weight. Like none of these issues actually go away. And I think in the sense of like AD specifically, what I found very interesting was all the way from the pods. I too watched the season, great season. But from the pods, I noticed that even the way she conducted herself was she had a really like soft, appealing, feminine energy to her. Her voice was very soothing. She had a higher pitch, like everything. It seemed like she knew she was also going on reality TV. She had to market herself as a feminine woman without somebody seeing her, and then a feminine woman when she was seen as well. And that was the bucket she seemed to throw herself into to maximize the way she would be perceived as desirable.
Yeah, no, 100%. First of all, I watched that whole season. We can dedicate a whole episode to AD, but if y'all want those sort of breakdowns, go into my YouTube channel, y'all. Shameless plug. But I definitely think, no, I agree with you. And I also think that we have to bring into the fact that AD is a woman of color, particularly a Black
100%.
woman, into this conversation. Because I think when you are like, someone said something and it's true, when you're a woman of color and you exist in a particular space, especially where all the other women are white or, you know, more white leaning in their presentation, you can become hyper aware of how people see you because of that. So I definitely think she felt like, oh, I look a certain way. Not only do I need to talk or sell him the fantasy of me being this type of woman, but when I, you know, he finally does meet me, finally lays eyes on me, I need to be all body. I need to be showing him how sexy I am. I need to sell the sex. I need to sell the fantasy. And I think women like AD, you talked about the aesthetic. They really want to be every type of woman in one. Like I need to be sexy and a caretaker and a feminine woman. And I think the pressure that she feels to be perfect, honestly, is part of the reason why the experiment failed for her. Because like, how can we really truly find love if we're still trying to fit into boxes versus being who we are? And like you said, it goes back to this objectification because it's like, I need to fit this aesthetic. In the Black community, people are very familiar with the Jezebel trope or the Sapphire trope, an oversexed Black woman that is a temptress or a seductress. And unfortunately, AD fell into that literally on reality television. They didn't write her a script and say, oh, you have to be the temptress. But I guess production made her feel like, because you're shaped a certain way, because you're darker skinned, you got to fit this. And she fell right into it and she fell for the bait. So it's sad, but I agree 100% with what you said. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like obviously I can't speak to this and I wanted to like hear more from your perspective as a Black woman. Like I've seen a lot of the time that features of Black women are often co-opted in the form of surgery via lip fillers or like to look a certain body type, etc. To enhance the beauty of a white woman while putting down a Black woman in the process. And so I wanted to like, you know, if like for you to actually talk about like how you perceived AD's like need to sexualize herself as a Black woman, especially not only to like differentiate herself against the rest of the crowd, but, you know, also what she may have been taught growing up and what she might have internalized.
Yeah, and I think that answers.
Sorry, I didn't mean to flip the question on you, but
no,
like,
definitely. Let's have a conversation, and I think that goes into like my next question. That goes exactly to my next question, which was how might these body image issues play out in our dating and relationships? I think as a Black woman, say if you are the Black woman in the room of white women or you know women that are not Black, you're hyper visible because of your melanin. So that's the first thing. AD understands all eyes are going to be on her. Whether she likes it or not, all eyes are going to be on her. People are going to notice her. And it's very easy to say, well, if I'm not the skinny white girl, let me be the baddie chick. Let me be the like, oh, she's super sexy. Let me sell sex. You know,
like,
she definitely did. She did, but the comfort that she had with people making the comments, that was the thing to me, because it's like, stand in your self-respect as a woman and don't allow them to reduce you to that. But once again, she reduced herself to something that Black women have traditionally been reduced to, which is a function of pleasure for men due to our bodies. due to our hips and our dips, due to our lips being bigger, everything has been sexualized on the Black woman. So she fell into that. And I think that I could come on here and say like AD fell into that, but most of us would have, because especially if it's a produced show and they want different personality types, and like you said, the different archetypes, that's marketable. So we want to choose a Black woman that's going to be relatable to Black women. Let's choose AD and let's have her act the way we want her to act, because that's how we think Black women act, just super sexual, and that's it.
No, yeah, and I think what made me sad is that obviously it's so easy for media and production to turn, especially Black women, into like aggressive or like undesirable standards as well. Like they're either over sexualized or they're turned aggressive. And I think that when it came to AD, I feel like I can't even say she fell into this archetype. I want to say she fed into it, because I remember during the reunion, I can't remember her name, but there was this one woman who said that her fiance should bean dip AD, and that like meant to flick her boobs. Like I remember that was what it meant. And during the reunion, she was obviously criticized very heavily for how weird this sentiment was, and she was like, "Oh no, me and AD used to do it to each other all the time. Like she was the one that said it was okay for me to do that, and she was the one that introduced me to that," or something like that. And that was like crazy to me, because I was like, you're allowing these people to treat you this way by introducing them to these avenues to sexualize you in the first place. And it was like, I think Chelsea was the name of the woman who pretended she looked like Megan Fox. And that whole thing, I thought that went on for too long. Like I see the resemblance. I understand the cute blue eyes. She in some version of reality, maybe, but I certainly would not have said something like that. But you know, and even she, like her fiance was like, AD is stacked or something like that. And then she felt comfortable enough to yell across this room full of people to say, yo, guess what my fiance just said? He said AD is stacked. And AD was forced to carry out a very uncomfortable conversation with this fiance, who now looked very embarrassed, because she was meant to take this in stride, not be offended, never give them any capacity to see her as aggressive, because she had to really feed into that feminine, sultry, like sexualized archetype, because that would be better than being seen as undesirable and aggressive on a show that's meant to market you as dateable. And marriageable.
Ooh, you got that. You got it. 100%. I agree with you. And I think you're right. It's either where certain women fall into these dichotomies. It's either you are the seductress and the temptress, or you are this, you know, undateable, angry, masculine. Right? Even the word masculine is weaponized against women. Masculine women, you know. So all of these things, woo, girl, we might have to have another episode where we just go into like the politics of femininity and like, you know, how we're taught to see ourselves. But my last question in this whole section, to kind of summarize it, like, what would you say to someone who feels the need to get plastic surgery to look more like AD, like curvaceous, or take Ozempic to look like Barbie Ferreira, more, you know, slim? Like, why aren't we happy with our bodies as women?
I think I would say take a minute and really evaluate whether you want to change your appearance in order to make you yourself feel more comfortable, which I've seen in the case of a lot of like nose jobs, where a lot of people grew up really hating their appearance with their noses, and then getting a nose job and feeling much happier, being able to interact more positively with people. And I think if it is an insecurity that you hold as an individual, and changing your body's type, or you know, changing anything about yourself will make you happier, whether that be breast implants or a BBL or really whatever it is, if that is meant for you and only you, who am I to judge? Do what you want to do. I will clap for you. I will call you gorgeous in your comment section. Like, I will hype you up. However, if you are getting these body modifications in order to look like someone else, or be perceived in a way that you think other people will perceive you positively with, don't. Because you literally can never win. Today it's AD, tomorrow it'll be like a waifish model on Vogue, like day after it'll be someone else. It might even go through trends based on people wanting to look like a certain race, right? Like it's like different ethnic, especially co-opting ethnic. years, right? So it's like, if you're modifying yourself and your appearance via plastic surgery to fit a trend, that is all you will be. You will be a
Yeah.
trend. And unless you can afford to not only be unhappy with yourself cyclically every time you become outdated, and therefore also have the capacity to pay for a reverse or altering surgery to get yourself into the new trend, don't do it, because you're not going to win. Nobody else is going to perceive you well, and you're just going to be unhappy. But if it is for yourself, more power to you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that comment. I really do, because I think it's something that a lot of us need to hear. Like, make sure that before you do these surgeries, you understand, or even like take Ozempic, you understand, like, who are you doing it for? Why are you doing it? I always joke and say like therapy should be mandatory before these sort of body modifications, but
Oh,
plastic surgeons
100%.
don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that because it's like, they profit off of people being insecure. It's a whole like insecurity industrial complex between the makeup, the wigs, the surgery, the Ozempic. I mean, any insecurity you have, oh, we can take it away with this quick fix. And I think like what you said, a lot of women need to hear that, because I grew up being, I guess you could say, thicker before it was cool to be thick. I grew up being thicker before it was cool to be thick. And granted, my weight distribution changed and everything, but I grew up being heavier, on the heavier side. And I know how that felt. I also grew up wearing glasses and everything. And before I grew into my nose, I thought I had a super big nose. So I was really insecure about a lot of things. And I think like what I would tell young women is you will grow into your features. Like literally, the creator made no mistakes when he made you. That weight will distribute where it needs to go. Your nose will begin to suit your face. Like, allow yourself to grow. And even then, why are we so stuck on these beauty standards that come from what? An arbitrary textbook that says that this is the golden ratio fake. Who cares? So I think that we have to reclaim who we are as people. And I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, if you do want to get the surgery, okay, but make sure you get it after you understand that it's for you. I'm gonna be big and say I don't want any surgery for any woman. I wish for a world where we don't feel like we need to have it. But I do understand there's some people that will go out and have it, and I respect that. But make sure you're doing it from a place of wholeness,
100%. Yeah. No, and I completely agree with you. I think in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to modify any part of our bodies or faces. But if we are ascribing to the unfortunate reality that we're in and people choose to get these modifications in order to improve their lives, I get it. But it is just one of those things that is so unfortunate to witness as a societal phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, that was woo! That introduced y'all to Alekia and how analytical she is, but how great you are at discussing these topics. I love that pop culture section. So let's get into your story. As you all know, we're the podcast for the people, the career, the culture, and we break up each person's story into, I guess we could say, 3 distinct parts. So we're going to start with the people section, which really focuses on who you are as a person. Growing up in India, what messages did you receive about mental health, body image, and the like? Was there extended conversation on these topics? Why or why not?
There was zero conversation about these things.
Okay.
Like I grew up, I moved to India when I was around 6 years old. And ever since, I think the only pervasive conversation was like ascribing to a meritocracy. Like you just had to work hard and be smart. And any conversation about mental health and mental illness was a sign of a weakness or a superficial concern. And there was no nuance involved in any form of conversation up until I was in high school, and when I personally decided that I wanted to bring these conversations to light at my high school. But before that, I do not remember anybody having ever talked about it. And if it was talked about, it was always very surface level.
Okay. If it was talked about, it was always very, can you give us an example of like the surface level type of conversation that you all would have?
Yeah, no. So I don't know if this is a thing in America, but in India, like what we had were these things called class assemblies. And through the year, each class would present like an overarching broad theme, and people would have like a play, they would include a song, they would have a dance potentially, and it would always have like a moral of the story at the end. And and each class across the school got to present it in front of the rest of either a couple of grades or the whole school. And so when conversations about mental health ever occurred, it was in order to fit a very cookie cutter, sweet narrative that had a moral of the story, where it would be like, this girl is getting bullied. And then three people would be like, but bullying is bad. And then that would be the moral of the story, you know? So it never really dived into anything. It was just palatable enough for everybody to think that a conversation was being had without actually taking in or doing the emotional work required to deconstruct the actual ramifications of these social issues.
Yeah. And I feel like that was a thing in America too, because we would have these stupid assemblies.
Oh, would you too? I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
we would. And we had programs like DARE, which is like drug awareness, something, something, something. And people still grew up and got on drugs. And, you know, like the US also failed us. America also failed us. And yes, I'm also Gen Z. So we grew up on assembly culture. They thought that having all these assemblies on safety and drugs and alcohol and everything was going to change things.
Yeah.
And it's like it changed absolutely nothing. And bullying, when there was so much bullying that still happened, oh my God, you know, but I guess I grew up on assembly culture and VHS tapes of here's what you do when you get bullied. You know, we all kind of grew up on that because very, very interesting conversation. So I know you also discussed being bullied growing up. I also was bullied significantly. And like we talked about before, like honestly, most women are at some point, like especially with these, I could say like impossible beauty standards. Like what did this experience of being bullied teach you? And then like what were the lessons that like you derived from that experience?
Yeah, no, so I'm glad you brought this up because this kind of like directly led to my eating disorder. So for me, it was like the kind of like bullying where it was very unexpected to me. Like my whole life, I'd always been very confident, very assured. I don't even think I ever perceived my body. Like I existed as a person. And
Yeah.
I unfortunately or not, like I started wearing a bra very early. So like I had to start wearing one when I was 8. So I had to start talking about like with my family in general, like being more conscious of the clothes I wore. It would be like, don't wear shorts when you go out or when you do this. And I was like 9 years old. So I had to learn to be conscious of being perceived sexually from a very young age because I was the first in my class to wear a bra, right?
Yeah.
And I remember in the 4th grade, like I used to love playing basketball. Like it was just my favorite thing. And this girl who was one of my friends went and told the whole class, she was like, oh my God, Alekya's like boobs moved when she was playing basketball. And I was 10.
What?
And I was so horrified. I cried so much in the bathroom. Like I hated my body. And I think that was the first time that I don't know if I consider that bullying. Maybe it is. Maybe I was like, bullied at that point. But this was my friend doing this, and I just felt humiliated. And then when I was an 8th grader, I had this friend group that was the kind that really, really thrived on like bitching about each other and being kind of toxic. And I had kind of been peripheral until it was my turn, and that's the thing about bullying a lot of the times is you don't expect to be in the line of fire until you are. And the girl that was bullying me, like it started off small. It was cyberbullying stuff, and it like from an anonymous account that I found out was later her. And then in a social setting, it was small comments where she would say things like, oh my God, I don't want to take this picture alone. Alekia, do you want to join me so I look better? And they started calling me the designated ugly fat friend as a joke.
Oh my
And
God.
that really messed with my perception of myself. And I always was like, never one to shy away from making jokes about myself. And like, I carried myself very confidently. So I didn't want to break down in front of these people. But it became so normalized to make these comments about me that it really messed with my sense of self and the way that I began to perceive myself, because I was no longer a person. I was a person in a body, and I could not separate the two. And so that's what really I think messed with me. But I think in terms of so in terms of what being bullied taught me though, is that it wasn't specific. And this took me so long to really come to terms with, because I carried so much rage and frustration with the person herself, the bully, and also the bystanders that said nothing or laughed at a joke. I think I carried so much resentment and so much anger until I realized that it literally could have been anyone. And I think a lot of the time, a bully will pick the weakest link in a group, not because they go to bed with this profound hatred of you, but because they go to bed with a profound hatred of themselves. And you happen to be a very, very easy target to assuage a lot of internalized issues that they have. And I know I always hated the whole like, oh, but they're just jealous and that's why they're treating you. I don't even know if they're necessarily jealous. I just think they're unhappy. You just happen to be the new target of their unhappiness.
I mean, a lot of us grew up hearing, thank you for that. Number one, I want to affirm you in this space and say, you are not the designated ugly fat friend. Whoever called you that, listen, rude, mean, but also false. Fake news. That's not who you are at all.
I know, I'm stunning.
Yeah, like, that's not who you are at all. So I just want to like, you know, tell them that they're wrong because they are wrong. But what I will say is what you talked about so eloquently, and thank you for going into that story because it models exactly what I and many of others went through. I mean, we grew up as the kids that we were the first group of kids on Instagram. We were the first group of kids on Facebook and these sort of net sites. So before there were all these, you know, cyberbullying commercials, we was out here getting cyberbullied because there was no conversation about what it was. I don't even know if they had the term cyberbullied in 2014 or 2013 when I was in high school. So these things were happening in real time. So thank you for speaking about that and also just being so eloquent in how you address that. I honestly think that you're right. It can teach you some key lessons about yourself. And I love the fact that you are so aware that you knew, okay, this is what literally led to my eating disorder. You talked about a lot of things. One of the most significant being that you were aware of yourself. You were aware of yourself, not just being a person, but being a body. And you talked about that, how the development of, you know, breasts influence that. And I think a lot about as women, how when we start to grow into our bodies, there's this hyper insecurity, especially if you develop faster than the other women. And then for some reason, when we become older, it becomes this source of, for certain women, this source of pride, as in like, oh, I'm more womanly than you. So like you said, it's all of these, like we project our hurt and our pain onto other people, and we let that sit and seep, and then we try to destroy them because somebody destroyed us. And it's very sad that that happened to you. But I love the fact that you were able to say, hey, this is how I see it. And I understand that they were hurting, and that had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with them. Because the truth is, I went through some very similar teasing. I wore glasses in the 8th grade. So fun fact, I glowed down, y'all, because I didn't start wearing glasses until I was about 13. And trust me, that's the age where everybody's like trying to glow up. And I grew up on the Instagram, like Flipagram, back, people who know Flipagram, where they'd have like the pictures of the music. Yeah, like, so I grew up on that, and people had like the glow up challenge, and they were like, oh, Surayya, you glow down. And I was like, man, what? I glowed down because I started wearing glasses. But that's what they thought, because I went from people thinking that I was pretty to people thinking I was ugly all of a sudden. And now that I'm older, I'm like, you know what? It was them. Like, we're conditioned to see women who wear glasses a certain way. And it was them reacting to that rather than me being ugly. I honestly look very similar with glasses and without glasses.
That's really fascinating to hear, because I like started wearing glasses when I was 9, and glasses, funnily, was never a point of stigma in my schools. I think like the majority of my class wore glasses. So, and so this is really fascinating for me to hear, like as like a sociological thing of maybe how like people wearing glasses are perceived differently in America as they probably are in India. Because for me, I often was associated with positive stereotypes for wearing glasses, where people thought I was
Yeah.
nerdy and therefore fit into the standard of what a smart Indian girl looked like. So,
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear that, glasses was a source of stigma, and that people were claiming you glowed down because you were wearing glasses. That's absolutely bizarre to
Yeah,
me.
they did. They definitely did claim that I glowed down and ridiculous. And then I also struggled with my own internal like who am I? Because not only did I wear glasses, but I was in high school, I was on the cheerleading team, I was on the dance team. So I still was doing, and people were like, "Oh, you can dance?" It's like, "Oh, you think I can't dance because you see me in glasses in, this AP class? You think I can't dance? What?" So I began realizing like the world judges and creates scripts about us based on how we look. And I was just like, wow, it made me want to become the opposite of that. It made me want to become the opposite of shallow, the opposite of one dimensional, the opposite of, what I saw in a lot of people. Because how rude could they be to tell somebody because they wear glasses, they done glow down? Who says that? But yes,
That's
I grew up in
ridiculous.
New York. I grew up in New York. So very different from India. And I grew up
Yeah.
in a huge glow up culture and I started wearing glasses and I still wear them to this day because I always think back to my younger self, and I think echoing to the lessons that it taught you, what bullying taught me was that my younger self needed to see a woman like me, needed to see somebody who wore glasses predominantly, and was not like, oh, like ashamed of it, like wasn't like didn't see it as a liability or something that makes them ugly. And I think about it and I carry my inner child with me all the time. And I make
Oh,
sure that, that person understands you can wear glasses and still be fly. Who the hell cares that you wear glasses? And you can switch it up and wear comics when you want to. You can be flexible, girl. Be all the people that you are. Like, don't hide from yourself. So I love that. I really do love that you said that and you were able to take those lessons.
I
So,
love that
yeah,
about what you said. Sorry, I want to like really real quick like talk
yeah.
about what you said about the inner child thing, because I don't think I had ever perceived it that way, but I like when
Mm,
you said that I was like, "Whew, that was a really good statement," because you're right. I think that looking back, a big lesson that, I would want to take away from this, and I would want anybody who faces any form of like societal or social adversity to be that pillar of strength and representation for the version of themselves that didn't have that. And I think that's like
mm.
something that I really carry with me as well, where it's not just my own inner child, but it is the literal child that exists somewhere that is probably going through the same thing or worse right now. And what I struggled with at the time was not having representation, because at the time, the Duff, the designated ugly fat friend, that was a movie. That was a book series, like,
Yeah,
or a
that was
book,
a
right? Like
stupid
that
movie.
was
I hate that movie.
whole movie. The plot of
I
that, and
hate that movie.
it went really viral in my like middle school. Like everyone was reading the
Mm,
book and watching it, and it's because the representation of that book. Yeah, maybe the point was that she gets the guy regardless, but the whole plot is centered around her not being as pretty as her two other friends and being perceived as the least attractive in this trio. And that's what people internalize. They internalize that they are compared to their other female friends. And it's just kind of how women are pitted against each other all the time in order to feel worthy. And
yeah.
so you're I would want to be the representation, not just in terms of like, you know, looking a certain way, but carrying the values that I wish somebody had talked about openly when I thought that this was the way the world worked.
And it's funny because I like you, I spent my childhood just kind of like, okay, well, not my childhood, my high schoolhood and up. Okay, I'm just gonna be this nerdy girl, be this smart girl, and go to school, get into a good college. And I had this like fantasy thinking about college because I was probably one of the more bookish people in my high school. Granted, I was still social and I still was a part of different things, but I was very bookish. And I went to college and I realized the girls in college wanted to be everything. They wanted to be the hot girl, the bookish girl, like they wanted to be everything. And I'm like, damn, like I was just comfortable being this, bookish chick that also likes to dance, that also loves, to cook. And then I'm also this advocate, activist, writer chick on top of it. I was like, okay, I'm a lot of different people, but Penn, like there was so much social pressure and the women wanted to be everything. And because we had a huge, fraternity sorority culture, even on the Black side, Greek life was also kind of popular too. There was this whole aspect of appealing to the male gaze. Once again, like, oh, you have to present yourself as this type of woman. Don't be too ambitious. Don't be too smart. Mind you, we're at Penn. So everybody here that didn't get in because of mommy and daddy's connections is very smart and very hardworking and very talented. Why should I hide that? Why should I hide that? So I had to even go through my own identity issues from being bullied. I was also told, like they're jealous. And yes, jealousy is a part of it. But I think another part of it was people just hate people that stand out naturally, whether it's you're just comfortable in your nerdiness and you just stand out because of that, or, you're just comfortable with yourself. A lot of people are still trying to play catch up. We're still trying to be that girl, that guy, him, her, main character. We're trying to be all these stupid aesthetics.
Well, because you're not an aesthetic, right? Like, and if you don't conform, people don't know how to evaluate you, and they feel threatened by that. They feel like not necessarily threatened. They immediately ostracize you in their own brain because they can't throw you into a bucket, and that's what makes people treat you worse.
Absolutely,
which is
absolutely.
So horrible.
You're right. So I want to talk about popular culture, right? Because you talked about in the pre-call, you looking up to popular culture, you looking up to people who you saw on TV. And a lot of us grew up looking up to different women on TV and television. I'm grateful to like come from the last generation of like good representation for women that looked like me. So I had a lot of positive representation, but there also was a lot of negative representation, especially with the Disney culture and the Nickelodeon culture that many of us were raised in. So what are some of the like pop culture figures, television, or even trends that first exposed you to the world of disordered eating, like especially for women?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question for me because I do have a lot of personal experience with this. But I mean, obviously, growing up, I watched a lot of like American shows, and there was not a lot of representation, if any. I don't remember really seeing any Indian girls in like a TV show when I was growing up, but I didn't even think about it until like now when I'm looking back and realizing I had no real representation. But I think when it came to disordered eating specifically, one other thing that really swept my middle school after the Duff was the Pretty Little Liars series. And I loved it too. I read all the books and watched every single season. I was hooked. But one of the like main characters, her name is Hannah. Her entire plot is that she was fat and ugly, and then over the summer, she threw up every day, and then she comes back and she is the pretty popular girl. And never did the show actually use the word eating disorder or bulimia. And if they did, it was done so quickly that I didn't catch it. So me, age 13, I was extremely impressionable. And this seemed like the equivalent of a rags to riches story. This seemed aspirational. And I had bulimia as well. And for me, growing up, I didn't have mainstream representation, but suddenly I had those same representation in my disorder, and nobody was correcting it. And that was the only representation I had known. And so Hannah Marin continues her journey being the it girl, being pretty. There were aesthetics made about her, and I learned that apparently the actress was told that she wasn't thin enough to play the role, which was crazy because she was a stunning, stunning character. And I never thought that there was anything wrong with her body. But it was that introduced me to it, and it was only 1.5 years into my eating disorder that I came across a Teen Vogue article, and the title was Demi Lovato opens up about her struggles with an eating disorder, and I was like, oh, I like Demi Lovato. What's an eating disorder? And I clicked on it. And that's when I looked at these keywords, which said bulimia, eating disorder. And then I go on a Google rabbit hole, and I was like, oh no, this sounds eerily familiar. And so for me, I guess then social media and influencer culture had both led me into a deeper spiral of my eating disorder journey, but had also saved me from it. Because if Demi Lovato had not opened up about this, and if that clickbait had not caught my eye, I don't know how much longer I would have even had an eating disorder and not even known it, because
Oh my
nobody
God.
talked about it. And so
Yeah.
seeing this girl that I had watched on Camp Rock and Barney and Sunny with a Chance talk about struggles, and not just talk about having them, but having overcome them or working through overcoming it,
Yeah.
gave me inspiration and hope that I wanted to follow in those footsteps as well. So I really was
Yeah.
disappointed in hindsight at how irresponsible media can be, glamorizing eating disorder cultures and showing young girls that this could be an aspirational path in order for them to gain social capital, rather than responsibly highlighting the mental damage that it carries with you, and that is a weight you cannot shed. And
Yeah.
I wish they had talked about it, but I'm so grateful that Demi Lovato had.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, amazing, amazing. Like, I can honestly think, and I feel like the way that you put things into words, what? Okay. Like, I'm a fan. No, I'm a fan because you're putting these very complex things into words. And the truth is what we're now realizing with, like, I talk about it all the time, like series is like Quiet on the Set. And then there's this new series that's called Child Star that's gonna come forward. While they were promoted to us, while these younger actresses were promoted to us to make us feel like we were, oh, not slim enough or skinny enough or even pretty enough, they were going through that same stuff behind the scenes where they were being told that they were too big to play this actress, or they were too slim, or whatever arbitrary weight standard was applied. It's ridiculous that they were also going through that at the, on the back end. I think, I don't know where I heard that Raven Simone talked about being weighed on set. Like they would weigh her on set while she did the Cheetah Girls too. And it's
That's
ridiculous, but that's the type of thing that they would, go through, because of course the camera adds weight to you. So let's make sure that your weight is always manageable. Every day before shooting, we're going to weigh you on set. Imagine being 19, 18, 16, 17, however old she was, maybe 17, 18, and going through that every single day. You're being weighed, and your weight is a topic of conversation amongst the entire cast. It's
that is
ridiculous. And when we look at them today and we want to ask ourselves, why did Demi Lovato struggle with drugs? Why did they struggle with the things they struggled with? It's like, man, their weight, like you said, their bodies became commodities. And now it's not just you eating off of your ability to be Sunny with a Chance. It's your family. Your mom and dad gave up their jobs to become your agents. It's your family. It's your future in this industry, this objectification driven, superficial industry. Like, so I think what starts off as something that is so pure, which is, I'm talented and I just want to be an actress, I just want to be a singer, you become polluted over time when you realize the ugly realities of what it takes to maintain an image. So it's funny that, number one, you saw that play out in Pretty Little Liars. They wrote that toxic storyline in of like someone, like you said, proverbial rags to riches, like the ugly fat girl, dumb ugly fat friend. I hate that movie, Duff, and my sister was watching it the other day. I was so mad. I was like, I hate this movie. Dumb, yeah, dumb, ugly, fat friend stupidness, to like, oh, the popular girl who's stunning. And then, Demi Lovato, that being her real life reality, like that being what she felt like she had to be to, I believe she also talked about being bullied significantly as well, to be Sunny with a Chance, to be this slim girl that everybody liked, to be this chick from Camp Rock. You feel like you have to make that transition and transformation. So I'm grateful that you caught yourself going through that, through looking at that interview, and then through also looking back and saying, okay, Pretty Little Liars is where I first was exposed to what this disordered eating looks like.
And it's really interesting that we come back to this, because this is what we were talking about even with Barbie Ferreira. She didn't know what she was getting herself into. She didn't know that this skill and talent that she'd had of just acting would become so, in your words, polluted. That is exactly what it is. And that's like what's so upsetting about the media industry, is what it does to its stars and what it does to its audience at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Okay. I'm gonna break us because I do need to go because I have some